And we are live. So, on Lifestyle Medicine today, we've got Katherine Bird. So, first of all, Katherine, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gray. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Can you, for the people listening, can you kind of give a background, Kat? You've got a pretty broad background of stuff that you do. Can you give, yeah, your titles, what you do, and explain a little bit for the everyday person what you're digging on these days?
Sure. I'm a shamanic practitioner, healer, coach. Been doing this work for a long time. So I mostly work now training healers, channels, empaths, mediums. And I have been studying Chinese medicine and medical qigong and Taoist mysticism, and so those are really alive for me right now.
Yeah.
And uh, I've been incorporating all of those things into my work, which is very much focused on practice cultivation, developing personal practices that really support you, understanding sensitivities and gifts and kind of the weird woo-woo stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
And then how do you manage those things, understand them, and then develop so that you can, be more on purpose and have more, higher health and vitality just through the process of understanding yourself and loving yourself to the next level of like whoever, whatever,
Yeah. Whatever you are, right?
whatever madness you might be,
Yeah.
how to live in the world in a more empowered state.
Yeah, the world's a crazy place. So I think those are all good skills to have, for all of us to have something to fall back on and to something to implement for sure. Before we dive into your stuff and just more details about what you're doing, when you're saying that you do you're a shamanic practitioner and you're sort of bringing these things to people, how how do you navigate bridging these things that are sort of from the East and maybe seen as esoteric or things that are seen outside the box? How are you able to deliver them, and what has been some of the hurdles, or have there been any? How do you deliver this stuff where it becomes digestible for the American public who doesn't have as much,
Yeah.
I would say, connection to it the way other traditions do?
Yeah.
Because I struggle with
Well,
this and I always want to know. If you,
yeah, for sure. I think one of the things is that I I didn't actually plan on any of this. I had a really intense, very radical, out of left field spiritual awakening that just kind of ripped everything apart and tore everything asunder, and really weird stuff started happening to me that I had no context. I had no awareness. I didn't know anything about anything. So,
yeah,
but it was so intense for me, this experience, and drawn out, that I had to become, a seeker, and I had to find my teachers and find my path and these pieces. And a lot of that was how to be grounded and how to be in the, fully embodied and able to be on the earth. And I feel like one of my missions is that to bridge, like, how do we bridge the spiritual and the mundane? Because we have to admit that we're both of
yeah,
those things. But so often what I see, and I know probably this is probably something that you see and kind of like sticks in you, where so often people who are, under the mantle of spiritual can feel so disconnected from reality and so just ungrounded, not
yeah,
really able to, they don't really have their shit together.
for
And
sure.
so then they start talking about very meta, esoteric
Yeah,
concepts that have no, if it's not serving your real life, if it's not making you a better person, helping you to create positive change on the planet, and making you feel better
yeah,
as a human inside your body,
right,
then what is the point? Why are you doing it? Number one, why are you teaching it? Why are you trying to explain something that's super confusing?
right.
when people don't really, like, that's not what people really want. Like, we want to know how to live, how to help our kids not to end up in therapy, and to, like, how to hopefully have the world end up being a better place because we've been here.
Yeah. Very well said. And I mean, I do. When you said, you're probably hip to this. I mean, that's been, and I think an ongoing, I don't want to call it a struggle, but it's an ongoing dialogue that I'm sort of always having and I'm always navigating. And I think you said it very well. I mean, I think in the past, what I've seen with people sometimes is you've got, people living on Earth and then people that are just like floating in the cosmos, that metaphor of just they're, and then I think the people on Earth are just like, what are you doing up there? I can't connect with you up there. Can you come back down and give me something digestible and applicable that can be applied? And, at least for me, and I know you definitely are like fully plugging into the Chinese medicine tradition with all the stuff that you're doing. But I liked that when I first got into school, that was kind of a cool thing that they said. They said, humanity is an intermediary between heaven and earth. And I was like, oh, right. Like there's this middle ground that we have to blend those two things together. And that sounds like what you're talking about too, is how do we take the stuff that's up high and meld it into the human experience, but also acknowledge that we're animals and living on a, three-dimensional spaceship here on Earth,
right.
and we're doing our thing. How do you, bridge that? It's a really good conversation. And I think thing that we all have to kind of keep on the forefront, because it does become inaccessible for people. They're just like, what the hell what are we doing here?
Right.
Like, what are we doing?
And, and then also when we think about, a lot of times when people think about shamans or whatever, shamanic, it's sort of a weird, esoteric, not really quite sure what that means. It's sort of a thing on TV or something, but, it's the same, these different traditions from different places, but it's the same concepts that we are the middle, that we are between heaven and earth, between the upper and the lower, and that we're here to give voice to all of it, right? We're here to kind of understand the earth and the elements and our part in that, and then to understand the higher realms and the other things that we can't see necessarily,
right.
And to be that voice in the world, to create with that awareness, I think is where some of us, I think we get blocked, is that we forget that we are this creative force that gets to use the inspiration from nature and from the earth and from our life, and then also from our spiritual connections or our meditative states or our exalted moments, to create and to be on the earth, to create change, to make art, to make connections with other humans, and to do something with it, right? It's like all well and good if we just sit around and talk about it all day long, but what are you doing with the awareness that you're seeking to cultivate?
Right. And you're talking about bringing it's how do we apply it? How do we actually apply this in real time? So it's not just esoteric theory, and it's not just pretty ideas, and it's not just disconnected, right? It has something that it can plug into, which I appreciate in the work that you're doing. And when I follow your stuff and I watch your material, I like that about you, that you're actively plugging it into people in real time. It doesn't feel as, because I have, and it's no slam to people that are aspiring and doing their thing, but I've just found that when people get too floaty, I can't even relate to it, and I'm interested by the topic, right? like I'm into it. I'm in Chinese medicine. I'm trying to digest the esoteric and make it 3D, but sometimes I can't even plug in. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I hear you, but what does this actually mean?
Well, and I mean, that's what I like about, tuning into your work, and that there's always that focus of, okay, here's the concept, but why do you care? Mm-hmm. And what does it mean for you? And how can you take this and do something with it? And, have another awareness around something so that you can change what you're doing, so that you can, feel better or understand, just understand why you're doing what you're doing. I think I think it's really interesting because we are in this space where so many people are waking up and having awakenings
Yep.
and realizations, and it's really happening and quite rapidly. And it's up to us to, be that bridge, to be like, it's really not that weird.
No, it's not. No,
and
I agree.
I sit here being like, okay, well, I teach people how to channel, and there's like, aliens and angels and weird ceremonies and things,
Right.
and like I'm the most woo-woo weirdo you ever met. Absolutely. And like within the context of that, I'm insanely human in my experience of even in all of that stuff. It's how can I be a human?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of spiritual people, and I love my little weirdo woo-woo alien type people, but like who really aren't actually in the body, aren't like inhabiting. When in Chinese medicine we're talking about the 5 elements, it's like they're just like not
there.
I'm just not going to do that part, right?
Right. I'm just going to stay disembodied, right? I'm going to stay out, right? That's absolutely right. And like I said, I mean, I know you're not saying it from a bad place either. It's just that I think that's where the stuff doesn't get digested, though. And then it does become separate, and we can't integrate. And then I think people are collectively less complete. We don't, because like you said, we are these things, right? We're both pieces that we have to, enmesh and lock up and link with and integrate. And when we are, we're more whole in our experience and everything.
We have to see how we can become integrated. And I think that when we don't do that, our tendency is to become separatist and to become dogmatic and to become like holier than thou, and these are the muggle people who are like the normal people who aren't on the trip. They don't got to go on. They don't know what the deal is.
Right.
And I think that as soon as we start to do that, we shut off the possibility of really connecting and opening up the conversation to, hey, we're all here being humans. Let's figure this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And we can do that together.
Right.
And all of us are spiritual. All of us are spiritual. Every single one of us is a spiritual being. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us is sensitive. Every single one of us feels. Yeah. And we don't like to admit that. And we don't like to, we put a lot of layers on, of how we can avoid feeling, but we're all feeling. And we're all in this like collective soup together, feeling each other all the time.
Yeah.
So
it's very true. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. To backpedal some, right? So the people that are listening, right? They, like you said, the term shamanic, right? They hear that word and they're like, oh, shamanic. I have my loose sort of definitions that I have in my head, and just from my years of experience of bumping elbows with people like you. But if you were to distill down, I would say like the definition or role of the shaman, how do you explain it to like the lay people? What do you say to people? Like, what's a shaman, at least to you, in your experience?
A shaman is someone who's in service to their community, connecting the earthly realms and the spiritual planes. Mm-hmm. And that's about it.
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward, right? It seems like, I mean, it's like the definitions I've heard are very similar, right? They've got, it's like 1 foot in the material reality, 1 foot in the immaterial, and they're attempting to bridge the two, right? Seeing down that third eye, like take the left and the right and see down the middle and see if you can integrate these things to make humanity and the human experience better, right? More efficient, more digestible, right?
And so one of the things I think about in that space is how, I mean, we're all shamanic. Like we are, as humans, designed to be shamanic beings, right? And I think about how in this moment, as we're sitting here on this planet that's going through an enormous fucking insanity, like we're all being asked to be more shamanic. We're all being asked to hold completely conflicting realities at one time.
Yeah.
And to see
It's very true.
The the horrors and the pain and the everything falling apart and everything in an enormous amount of destruction and people hurting each other and hurting animals and hurting the planet. And then also to hold within our consciousness the beauty and the grace and kindness and hope and faith and all of those things. Like we can't just live in one or the other. And I think that this is the way that we as our regular humans can go, okay, that is a shamanic perspective. That's holding both realities at the same time and looking with clear eyes to find the solutions to whatever problem is arising within those two systems.
Right. It makes you more adaptable. It seems like you have a better chance of just breaking down what's happening around you. And I think that's, at least for me, that's the big takeaway with this stuff, is that I feel like these world traditions, these shamanic lineages and the shamanic spectrum is, they're trying to paint and understand reality from both sides. And I think that, and if people, like you said, right, if the Muggle people they get so stuck in one or the other, it's not integrated and it's not whole. So it just, I think it's a really beautiful way to paint the picture of the human experience, and it helps all of us adapt better. So I appreciate the work that you're doing just as you go through, and I see your stuff. I think it's important, and people are grateful more often than not especially, right, you're finding your people who are like, oh, thank God, there's a way to look at this shit show, in a more sound way where I don't feel as destabilized and I don't feel as unhealthy and I don't feel as sick, mentally or spiritually.
Yeah.
So that's, that's a breath of fresh air in the bigger picture, I think.
Right. And that you don't have to be like this very weird perfection of the like yogi, in the meditation and the fasting and the perfect Instagram story in order to have that.
Yes.
That you can have a job, you can have your family, you can be working in the world and doing what you're doing and, having a steak and like watching football and whatever it is, right, that you're into, and still have this other aspect of yourself that you're tuning into and being supported by.
100%. I agree, and I really appreciate that you said that, because I think that's part of people. I think people think sometimes they have to take on a certain archetype or persona to research these things, to embody them, to study them, to practice them. That you've got to have a headdress on, you got to wear your Taoist garb, and and it's like it doesn't have to be ritualized. People do that, and I think it's fine, but it doesn't have to be that. And I think that opens up another door for people, like, oh, you can be a regular quote unquote person. Even in my experience, I have this conversation quite a bit with my friends, my close friends. I still am. I'm like a comic book nerd. I always grew up watching superheroes, and I read the comics. I collected the cards. My epicenter hero always has been Superman. And I'm always amazed at how that character, right, he's like sitting on a winning lotto ticket, invulnerable, has all of these amazing powers, and also is like the dorky, mild-mannered guy who just goes to his job, makes average money, and is just kind of, observing reality and doing his thing, but he's got this totally split personality. And I always kind of like that, and I always think about it, in terms of a character that I'd like to play. I'm like, I just want to look like a regular guy, quote unquote, and that's just the way I want to do it. But I like sitting on this other stuff and exploring this other stuff that's deep and out there and takes my mind and my body to different places. Like for me, that's a fun ride, to have the interplay between the two. But I think inviting people into that and saying, yeah, you don't have to be, you don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to do these, it doesn't have to look a specific way, basically.
Right. Well, I think then we start to hit up against, and because I work with a lot of people who kind of have that, normal thing, life and whatever. And then something happens, and all of a sudden they're like, holy, what the,
Yeah,
oh my
totally.
God, like what is going on? And
Right, right.
that is a huge
Yep,
transitionary moment of discovering the deeper pieces and discovering who you are.
yep.
And it's, it's sometimes we have huge judgments, of
Hmm.
ourselves in those moments of like, oh my gosh, really? Is that what I'm thinking? Is that what I'm doing? Like, am I that guy now? Am I like,
Right.
oh my gosh, I'm that person. Like, I know I've had that conversation with myself. Like, oh, like, am I really that weirdo person? Like, did I just say that? And it's like, yeah, I did. I
Yes,
just said
yes,
that
yes, I
out
did.
of my
Right,
mouth.
right.
And because we judge ourselves, because,
So
we come
true.
from families that didn't accept,
Big time.
anything that was just a little bit different.
Hmm.
And then you start to be interested and, we're like, well, my back hurts, so I'm going to go to acupuncture. And then we're like, okay, that's a thing. And then you're
Right.
like, oh, and it just kind of
For sure.
snowballs and escalates. And then the next thing you know, you're talking about energy, at
Right.
Thanksgiving dinner, and you're like, oh, wait, what just happened to me?
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's funny though. I mean, but it's all accurate and it's all true. Like it's a good. It's I think it's a good thing to touch on though. Like it's a great topic just for people to hear because I think it does open the door. Can we, Catherine? Can we go into prior to this interview? We had talked about some of the work that you're kind of pushing into and you're going into now, and you had spoken of the. I think it's a course you're doing, the empath, the 5 elements for empaths. Is that
Yeah.
what's the title?
Yeah.
What's it?
Five elements for empaths.
Five.
Five elements for empaths. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 elements for
And
empaths. That's interesting. I would
yeah.
love to hear more about that because I got questions about empaths first of all, and then just Chinese medicine 5 elements. Like I'm hip to it, but I think the idea is very cool. It's like a nice blending of things to ground
Yeah.
ground out this larger topic.
Right. Yeah. So, so we'll just start with empaths, right? And I'll say that I haven't actually ever put anything out that was just like specifically for empaths, even though they're on my roster of people and everybody I work with is an empath in some kind of way,
Sure.
right? But just to kind of a little bit of a definition around it is that everyone can practice empathy and to put yourself in someone else's shoes to be able to kind of understand their experience and so on. It's basic human function unless you have a severe personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And but then empaths are generally defined as people who actually feel themselves more of what the other person is going on, whatever's happening. They're feeling it.
Yeah.
Right? So they can feel it as physical pain or feel emotions that other people have or feel sensations as they go into a room. And it's like a personal experience of everything else that's out there.
Right.
And it's often super confusing and often overwhelming and troubling and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
every other thing. It's like I feel too much and I've got toxic people all around me and I'm overwhelmed by the world. I just can't kind of quite handle stuff. My emotions are really all over the place. Not really sure what's mine. Are a lot of the issues that are coming up.
Mm-hmm. Would
You
you
know?
would you say for the idea, right, this concept of empaths, would you say that I mean it's a spectrum. You said everyone has, right, everyone is an empath to a
Yeah.
degree. And it sounds like there's a gradation of some people that are very much leaning towards like
Yeah.
extreme empath and then like maybe mildly empath. Is that
Yeah.
is that accurate in terms of
Yeah.
thinking about it?
It's a total spectrum. And then, what we have to look at is how we were trained as empaths. And so a lot of people, we're all on a spectrum of sensitivity of what we're sensitive to. But then when you're a child and you grow, especially when you grow up in a home where things were unsafe or situations, even at school or with peers or whatever, but especially if the home is unstable in any kind of way, if there's anything going on where you have to start tracking other people's emotions in order to stay safe. So, okay, I
Oh,
know
wow.
if dad comes in and he's feeling something, if I feel it first, I know I can get out of the way. I'm going to be safe. Or I can crack a joke, or I can like do something cool. I can make sure to diffuse the situation so that
Right.
I don't have to be in, I'm in fear, but I don't have to like have the repercussions of what's going on.
Right.
Or I can start to understand the dynamics that are going on between my parents, and I can start to soothe them or to, help them with their emotional issues. So we train this in, and then energetically, we're also training in those situations where we're capable of basically like sucking the energy and the emotions out of the room, out of other people, to kind of like
Yeah.
try to process it and transmute it within
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
So we develop those patterns as kids, and then we just keep doing it and keep doing it. And I'll just take on everybody's stuff, and I'll just take this energy, and I'll just track you and you and you all at the same time. And I'm going to
Right.
be safe by doing this. And it becomes such an ingrained pattern, we don't realize we're doing it. And then like the system just gets overloaded. It
Right.
just it just can't handle anymore.
Right.
It's like
Implodes, right.
it's been absorbing and trying to process and holding on to all of this toxicity since you were a
Right.
kid. And then plus, usually in that situation, you were told, don't be a crybaby, grow up.
Right.
Why are you so emotional?
Right.
You're not allowed to say no to me. Don't you be with that angry face at me. Like, whatever those things are. Like,
Yeah.
stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. All the
those are like
right.
the perfect storm. So then we're just like, oh, I'm just like loaded. I'm just like my
Yeah.
emotional body is so becomes so densified that just coming in contact with someone else out there in the world who's got any kind of emotion, I feel it so strong in my system.
Right.
And how I look at it is like a tuning fork, and if one tuning fork is near another tuning fork, you
Yep.
hit it, the other one starts to vibrate.
Yeah.
So
Entrainment, right? Like that's the word, right?
yeah,
Entrainment,
so
right? Yeah. Yep.
it's like and then
Right.
it's like vibrating off of your own repressed and stored emotions and energies. So then everything feels too much. And it's like, yeah, I can't tell if it's mine or yours because it's yours. Well, it's sort of
Right.
resonating with something deep within me.
Right.
So it becomes just the perfect storm, right? We can't handle it. And then it's like sludge. We're just sludgified.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's man, it's a great the way you painted the picture is really good because I have two things that I want to say that are so one is before I don't know how long empaths have been talked about, how long it's been circulated in the culture, but I feel like what you just described years back when I had a friend of mine who actually had cancer in his youth, actually ended up getting cancer, got chemo, did the whole bit, survived. But before empath was even like a nomenclature, at least in our social circles, when he was talking about what he took on as a kid, right? This thing of like tending to his parents who had drug problems, and it was just like all these crazy things. When that term came out, you pretty much described his life in a nutshell. Before he knew the definition, before I could have even put words to that, that's exactly what he was doing as a kid. And before we had this terminology, he was saying like he really felt like this really had a hand in his cancer process. Like he just took on
Yeah.
so much and it materialized in the body in a way. So my next question with this though is, and this isn't a leading question, I'm genuinely asking, could I think about this in a sense that saying that, people that are empaths, in a sense, it's almost like an energetic injury they take on at some point, but then if they learn to temper it, actually becomes a strength
Yeah,
later.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I had a client before this, and she was talking about how her experience used to be, oh my gosh, I'm feeling all of the things, and everybody, oh, it's so uncomfortable, and
Right.
it's just activating my nervous system, and now she's like, it's not that I don't notice or feel, it's just it kind of doesn't affect me. It's like I can just be with it. And
Right.
that's the thing. It's like if you don't have anything for it to ding off of and resonate with, then you can take that information and you can go, okay, well, I can tell that you have a lot of anger or in your in your reality. I'm going
Right.
to cross the road. I can tell that
Yeah.
you're super sad. I'm going to hold space for you. I can tell that, whatever it is. And this is how, we train ourselves to be better partners and parents and healers and teachers and leaders, is being able to be with whatever's there, that someone
Right.
else is having an emotion, they're having an experience, and we don't make it about us.
Right. Right. And it makes me think about herbs, actually. When you look at like adaptogenic herbs, they have to take on these really gnarly stresses. Ginseng, goji berries, they grow in these really tumultuous climates, drought, heat, tons of rain, lots of cold, and it's sporadic. And what they come out, right, when these plants, when they adapt to those stressors, and then when we ingest them, they have this, bolstering effect. It becomes medicine, essentially.
Yeah.
Like the stresses that they've taken on actually become a medicine once they've learned to adapt, right? Once they've learned to integrate the stressors. So I have a question. I want to stay on this thread, but it's a question, one that I've kind of tossed around with my friends. We've had this conversation a number of times, and because I think of my yin yang theory of Chinese medicine, I'm always looking for like the polarity. And so one of the questions I'm always kind of brought back to is that, as you were saying, the spectrum, right? You've got someone who can be extremely empathic, and then people that are mildly, maybe they didn't have these things. They didn't have to check their parents, right? They didn't have to like track all these people. I have always used the term loosely, and I don't even think it's the right word. It's just I don't have a better word. But there's empaths, and I'm like, there's telepaths, people that actually push out. They weren't encumbered by maybe that kind of patterning, and they actually push their energy out as opposed to taking it in. Is there a concept or word or terminology that that's the way I've thought about it. Like, it's not even a fully matriculated idea, but that is the way I have thought about it. And I'm wondering, because I know people who lean more that direction. They're like, yeah, I notice all that stuff, but I'm just about pushing out. Like, it can be excessive, right? It can almost be like they push out their energy too much onto people, and it needs to be reeled back. Is there a word for that, the opposite of an empath? And if so, what is it? Or how do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like if you tune into like the empath support groups out there, they'd be like, "It's a narcissist."
Right. These people are shitty, right? Yeah.
Empaths are like at war with the narcissists, right?
Right.
And I hate to tell you, there's really not that many narcissists out there for like all of you empaths to be having relationships with them.
It's funny.
So, yeah. I mean, I don't know what that word is. We need to create a word for that, because it's not necessarily like a personality disorder, but it's like a different energetic reality.
Yeah.
And to have that strong field, and I think, we're all, like you said, it's like the yin and the yang. We're here to learn how to find balance. And for our people who don't have that strong field, to be aware of how to create that and how to have boundaries, and, how to say no and how to, push themselves out into the world is really important.
Yeah, agreed.
Because these are feeling people and sensitive people. So if your voice isn't being heard and your wants and needs aren't being expressed into the world, then nobody's listening, and things aren't going to change for the feeling people.
It's very true. I mean, that's exactly right. It's like anything, right? You got to take in to push out, right? It's just like the Dutch door, but it goes both ways. And I think, the better we can get aligned with that, the better off we are. With your course and this, and that was a great, thank you for that layout that you just had for empaths, right? That filled in some holes for me, and I talk about this, but with that, and you're saying now the 5 elements, right, for empaths. So the 5 elements, right? There's elements are different in different traditions, right? There's the Vedic tradition, they have 4 elements. Chinese medicine has 5. I know you are exposed through David Beaudry and through his program Medical Qigong, and I think you're doing the other Taoist mysticism. Was
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
with Kelly?
With Kelly.
Kelly, yeah.
Yep. Sifu Kelly.
Right. So with that, how are you sort of blending that 5 element theory in relation with with the empaths? How is it linking up? Is there like kind of a general picture you can paint for that?
Well, really looking at the elemental system and its relationship to the emotions and to the higher virtues.
Yeah.
And so then through the process of qigong and breath work and sound work and practices and inquiry work and like really looking at stuff, processing and releasing and letting go. So releasing from the energetic level the stuff that doesn't serve, out of the organs and the meridians, and doing practices to clear the channels, and to move the energy out, right? To break up the stagnation so that things can move, and then to work on that cultivation of that higher spiritualized essence and the virtues and the welcoming in of what we're replacing that stuff with.
Right.
And looking at it from that level of, how do we move the old stuff without getting into the old story?
Right, right. Like not falling back to an old pattern, more or less.
Yeah, and that we don't always need to. Sometimes we need to stop talking it out. We need to just get in.
I'm so glad you're saying that. Yeah, because sometimes it's like, get the fuck out of your head and just get into your body and move it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then because what happens in our daily normal life, right? We go out, we're interacting with the world, something triggers us, so it causes discomfort in us in some kind of way, triggers us. And then we try to figure out why we're triggered so that we can interact with someone else and try to fix them or be pissed or the situation or whatever it is, or soothe ourselves with food or alcohol or shopping or TV.
Yeah.
Like we go through these patterns, and these are our habits. This is how I deal with stress. This is how I deal with my life. This is my pattern. This is what I do. And instead of like, okay, this is an emotion I'm feeling. This is an energy that I'm feeling. And okay, what's the tool? What's the quick tool? What's the quick sound? What's the quick movement? What's the focus that I can do to move this out of my system, out of my field, out of my body, come back to a centered space so that I can be like, yeah, wow, you're really being an asshole right now. And that's interesting that you're choosing to be that way. And I'm good over here.
Yeah.
And, okay, I can stop just like blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And we can also stop being like, okay, well, in order to move past this thing that happened to me in the past, I need to just talk about it for the next 15 years. It's like, well, how about we just move some of that energy and just see what emerges through the process of that, and then let's stack some of these other pieces on top and see what kind of deeper healing inquiry work that we can do, working with our inner child and loving ourselves more fully, even though we're imperfect. We all have emotions.
Yes, we do.
all have emotions, and we can't hide from them. We can't hide from the world. It's not going to work.
I could not agree more, and I love that what you're saying. And one of the, just to give context to, for the people that aren't Chinese medicine people in some of these terms, I just want to give like a context to what you're saying, and also like to also add to what you're saying is that when we think about the human body, it's the 5 elements, right? They take into account that the organ systems in the body relate to these 5 elements: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And in the end, our body is sort of like a little mini planet Earth, right? It has mountains and rivers, and it has it has fire, and it has all these different things, and there's information being processed by this thing, this flesh suit, all the time, and all the stuff that we're taking in. If we see a traumatic event, someone that yelled at us, we take these things in, And just like in a nature scenic, right? Like rivers can become dammed, right? Just through debris, and like they'll get backed up. And what you're saying is, and what I really appreciate is that it's sort of like if we saw, a stream or a river backed up and dammed with a bunch of debris, and we sat on the banks and we're like, well, let's talk about the strategy of how we're going to get this shit out of the water. Like, which animals are we going to deploy to help move this, and what flora are we going to inoculate into the water to help with the toxins? And it's like, or you could just go down there and start picking up logs and just start picking up stuff and be like, okay, there's movement, there's something.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that I like about what you're saying is that in the end, right, we have information coming into the body, and the free flow of information needs to be coursing through our body well. Yeah. And as soon as it stops and backs up, at some point we need a new operating system. And I feel like that's kind of the stuff that I feel like these traditions and the stuff you're doing, like this course in particular, it's like, that's a new operating system. Like, here's some shit you can do, to move and course things out of your body so you're not stuck, right? So that you're not in stasis. The river doesn't stay dammed. It doesn't stay stuck. And that's liberating, God, for people. I mean, especially I think probably for empaths, right? Who are just, who can like take on and get damned pretty like easily.
I'll take all the logs over here. I'll just collect, you have extras, I'll hold those for you. And it's like we're all that to some level or another. I mean, I say it's 5 elements for empaths, but really it's for everybody, just because like, we all are we're all a mess. Like, let's just face it. All of us are a mess. Oh, yeah. Nobody's got their shit together. It's just, if you think somebody does, just stop it. Like,
stop.
But it's, we need to have a relationship with ourselves. We need to have these deeper understandings of like, okay, this is maybe why I'm feeling this way. And these are the tools and the patterns and the habits I've developed in order to stay standing and survive. And actually, those are shitty tools and habits because I learned them from my shitty family when I was 3 years old, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And I was 3, so I was making really bad decisions.
Right.
So, okay, now what am I going to do now? And what I like to do is to give people, like, I always give people a lot of information, but like, okay, here's a thing, like, here's something you can do. Do the thing. If you do the thing and it shifts something, if it changes something, if you feel a little bit better, if you feel a little bit lighter, if you feel a little less stuck, then from there you can start to problem solve.
Right.
But so often we're trying to solve our life problems from the space of just like, how do I deal with these fucking people in my house and in my job, and I hate them, and what is wrong with them, and why do they act that way?
Right. Why do you all suck so bad, right? Oh my God. Yeah. Well, so Katherine, this begs the question, and this might be an overly simplified question, but I've had it asked to me, and I think it's a relevant one for people that are not necessarily plugged into this scene and they're not actively thinking about this kind of stuff. Some people, it's not even on their radar that some of their patterns might be toxic as shit for them. They're just sort of on autopilot and they're running down the course. And sometimes it just takes a person like you to ask, are you sure that, this operating system is great for you? How do you actually feel? But for the people that are just numbed out and they don't even know how to assess this, like, what's the kind of baseline way to get people to inquire about their habits, their proclivities, the mechanisms that they do, maybe overeating, maybe drinking, maybe smoking too much pot, like whatever the thing is. How do you kind of get people into that state of, self-assessment, inquiry, like take a look at what you're doing? How do you get them into that?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big things is just to look at like, okay, what do I do when I'm stressed out? Like, what's my go-to thing?
Yeah.
What is that thing or things, multiple things that I do when I'm stressed out? And what do I do when someone rejects me or shames me or makes me feel less than?
Yeah.
What's my go-to coping mechanism in that moment? What do I do if someone approaches me with anger or a tough emotion? what do I do? Because some of us explode, some of us completely shut down, some of us go shopping, some of us, eat the ice cream. Like we all have the different things. And, it's also nice to look at like, well, where the fuck did I learn that?
Yeah.
Because you learned it from somewhere. Like there was some moment when you were like, oh, I talk to people a lot who like, oh, well, cigarettes. I've been trying to quit cigarettes for years and years and years, and it just never works, and nah. And then, but they've never actually been in any inquiry of like, when did that help you? Like, like when was that a tool for you? When was that supportive? When did that support you being okay in the world? And they're like, oh my gosh, I had this horrible experience and I couldn't cope and I started smoking and it was just like it saved my life. And so there's these parts of us that are having relationships with these outside influences and habits and stuff that we're not even conscious of, we're not even aware of. Like, when I was a teen and I got picked on at school, I would go home and eat a whole thing of ice cream, and like that made me feel better.
Right.
That's how I survived being a teenager. And so it's like, well, okay. So now you have this eating thing and you're trying to like battle the eating, right? You're trying to like, be at war with the eating thing. But it's like, well, no, it's the part of you that's still needing that safety, that's still needing that energy, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and it makes me think about. Do you know who is? I mean, he's not really technically in our field. He's in the health and wellness, but there's a guy named John Gabriel. He does. He's done. He does like food. Yeah, food, weight loss. Yeah. And I had studied some of his work just because I'm always kind of following people just in what they do. But one of the stories he told was just exactly what you pointed on, and it was one of the things you said were like the actions and the things that we do to take on to protect ourselves, right? It was functional. It saved us at a time. And he told this really heartbreaking story of this woman, when she was a girl, how she was molested by her father, when she was younger. And as she ate more and put on weight, her father found her less attractive. And she'd kept all this weight, as she'd gotten older. And it was just a heart-wrenching story. But at the same time, once she hadn't become aware of it, she hadn't, that exact process, right? Someone, and I think John Gabriel was kind of guiding her back through the mind-body work. He was saying, so when did it help you? When did it keep you safe? And it had kept her safe for years through her childhood. It stopped after she put on weight. And then as an adult woman in her, 30s, it was like, well, you don't need that anymore. That's got to peel back. And then she lost all this weight, and it was actually the emotional shift. Her diet didn't even shift. It was once she kind of got a grips with that, it was like her physiology turned back on, and the body was like, okay, I can drop this,
I don't need this protection.
I mean, yeah, and it was amazing. Like I thought, damn, that's a powerhouse of a story, but it's exactly what you're talking about. Like it's the same kind of thing. Like, what was I doing and when was it functional?
Yeah.
And the acknowledgement of that, that's pretty huge.
Right. And that's the thing about the whole empath thing. It's like, okay, this was super functional for me. This really helped me out.
Yeah.
But now, like when you talk to people and they're just like, I can barely function. I know that I have this gift, or I have this desire to help people or be of service or whatever, but I can't do it because I can't, put myself out there, and I'm afraid of what I'm going to take on or what I'm going to get from other people, or, it's like this contagion. I'm afraid of what I'm going to pick up because I've become so sensitive because I needed to be so sensitive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we develop the relationships in our life so that we can continue to have that happen, right? So we develop relationships with people who are total assholes and narcissists and the whole thing, so that we can be like, I'll keep tracking. I'll just let me keep going. Let me keep tracking. Let me keep trying to figure everything out, because that's what my system does, and that's what's going to feel good to me, even though it's super uncomfortable and actually I hate it.
Yeah. Oh man. And I can just tell you, I know many people throughout my life, and I can still look back on people that I know now that are living that, where they're still in those patterns. And I think I really have compassion for people too, because it's like no one's actively wanting to. I mean, no one loves feeling like that, and being stuck in those states, but it does happen. Like people get stuck for a long time, into
Yeah.
into adulthood and into old age where they're stuck in those patterns.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, God, if there's an opportunity to break that cycle, and we're lucky enough to find someone, who can help us with that, like that's a beautiful thing. Because who wants to live like that? I mean, who wants to be stuck like that life, the quality of life isn't great. We don't feel good. And that's problematic. I mean, in the big picture.
Well, we get, we get habituated and we get used to it, and I know, my grandmother was, pretty much for quite a long time at the end of her life, just totally agoraphobic. I mean, even,
oh, wow.
Like total, really didn't leave the house, hardly ever. And I know, like, my mom is really in that same space of like, it's a thing where she's like, got to work herself up to, like go to the grocery or whatever. But the habit is like, if she doesn't push herself to do different things and to actually change that, is to be like, okay, well, it's just too much. Everything's too much. Everything's too much.
Right.
And so I know that for me, like that's not an option. I'm not headed down that road. I'm not gonna, I can be super sensitive, very aware, very conscious of what's, going on and feeling things, and completely activated out into the world. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, the because of fucking practices, man, like really, it's like practices and proper food, and like that's about like that's the deal.
It's huge.
Like,
it's huge.
I've been through that experience of being like so super sensitive, couldn't hardly leave my house, like couldn't hold hands with somebody because it would freak me out too bad. Like, I've been there. I know what that's like, and it sucks,
to say the least. And I think it's really it's powerful that you've just given you just what you're saying, given your, what you would say, your upbringing, what you saw, you have, I mean, God, what you're doing with your career, your job, your mission. I mean, you're putting yourself out there, you're like leaning into those things that, I mean, that's again, it goes back to that thing, right? The stressors that we have in our youth, the things that we see, it can actually become a medicinal thread of our life. Right. And which is usually the case, right? Like heroes aren't born, they're made, they have to they have to go through these pretty difficult situations, but that's great to hear, like as a personal experience that you have where you've gone like, okay, I saw how that goes and I'm not doing that. Like, I don't want to do that. And you've been fortunate enough, it sounds like, just to get, the mentors and having your own awakening to where you've been able to push into those uncomfortable areas. And it's been now something that you're leading others to do. That's great. Like, that's so cool. That's a win story.
That, right?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, right?
Hopefully, like we'll all just like lean into ourselves as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing to do, and I think there's so many different ways to lean into the uncomfortable. There's a lot of different ways to do it. For me, throughout my life, martial arts was it for a long time. Like, the really intense martial art training was like leaning into uncomfortableness, because even though I'm big, like physical conflict just was always like, it freaked me the fuck out. I'm just like, shouldn't, but by theory, but it was always like, I just don't like it. So I was like, I'm going to push into this. And it was really helpful for me to get my psyche around it. But I'm amazed at how many people are unwilling, or they don't see the value in leaning into the uncomfortable. They don't want to lean into it. And I'm like, God almighty, like, that's so important to be really uncomfortable with the things that we're doing, and I have to do that in my life all the time with business and like with, like making videos of myself. It still fucking weirds me out when if my wife listens to like a video I'm doing and I hear my voice in the kitchen, I'm like, oh, this is fucking weird. Like, turn that off. Like, it's so weird, it's like, it's very uncomfortable. But those things, I mean, that's where the meat and potatoes are. Like, that's where a lot of the growth seems to come from. Absolutely. Is like, you got to be so damn uncomfortable. That's the irony, right? It's like the cosmic joke. Like, you have to be really uncomfortable to get somewhere. That's just...
Absolutely, you do. And, I mentor a lot of healers and coaches and so on. And there's always that, whoa, this is so uncomfortable, okay, am I really going to do this? And it's like, yeah, okay. And for a lot of people, that uncomfortability is just like, oh, putting up a Facebook post, or like
Right.
it is like overwhelmingly impossible almost,
Yeah.
to just, put like that truth, that little bucket of truth out there. But once you start doing it, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, that's uncomfortable. I'm getting used to being uncomfortable. Okay, that's still uncomfortable. Okay, now I'm doing this. Well, okay, I'm just going to continue to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's not as bad as it once was, right?
Yeah,
There's
it's like,
there's
okay,
improvement.
that's easier. That's
Totally.
easier now. Easier now. Easier now. Which
Absolutely.
is great. Right now I'm really uncomfortable with, I have a new organization person, and she's like, I have all of this like admin stuff with like spreadsheets and lists and like,
Oh God, yeah.
oh my gosh,
My
that's
worst
my
nightmare.
uncomfortable.
Totally. Totally. I'm like, wait, you mean I have to like there's organization required in adulting, and that I mean it's difficult. I can relate fully. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, it's not easy. Well, Catherine, like what else, in the context of this conversation, are there any like like, I don't know, overarching closeout ideas that you think are really relevant for people that are listening to this, to open this door better for themselves and to start this process of self-inquiry and, using their, I don't want to say their injuries, but, the things that have been difficult. Yeah, like what are your, just those kind of those big overarching closing ideas about how people can start this process for themselves and how they can enter into it better?
Yeah. Well, I think the one of the main pieces is to allow the possibility that everything that you've been through, everything that you've experienced was there in some sort of service.
Mm-hmm.
That it doesn't matter what it was, and there's something there. There's something
Yeah.
there's something golden there to be discovered and learned and worked through in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And like to start to kind of shift, if there is that energy of like, well, fuck, like my life is really hard and I don't know how to make a change, right? Where a lot of people get stuck in just that like loop.
Right.
Just that it's possible, I think is really important for us to keep putting out there that change is the thing we were born to do. And we're here to transmute and transform. And, we're here to work through all of our stuff and to work through all of our patterns and our habits and all, like, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
We think it's other shit, but really we're here to learn how to love ourselves. And I hate that like the essence of always is like, oh, great, love yourself.
Yeah,
right.
So simple and yet so difficult.
Can I have a different answer to this problem?
Yeah.
No, I have to learn how to love myself within this experience. And sometimes loving yourself means being in the discomfort of knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Well said.
through that process, like it gets easier, it gets easier.
It does.
It becomes more easeful. Things clear up. Things start to show up in a more easeful way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that getting started and spending some time alone and spending some time sitting and spending some time journaling and asking for help.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? Just asking for people. I mean, I always think, I always say to myself and my friends, I'm like, I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with. Like, that's a big thread that I've always kind of been around. And God, the people in my life that have helped me just as a result of me asking, because I've been like, look, I'm fucking lost and I'm in a shit show right now. So can you help me get out of this in some way? Give me a sliver of what you got. And it is. I mean, that's a big piece, asking for help. I could not agree more.
Yeah. That's, I think, where we mess up the most is we think that we're like in it all alone and there's no one that's going to help us or nothing we can do. There's nothing I can do about this.
Right. And that we're alone, right? That, we're alone in this process. And it's like, definitely not. I can't remember how many times I've opened up about something and be like, oh yeah, Been there 1,000 times. I'm like, really? Oh, well, like we're all in this shit show together. That's kind of nice that
We are.
it's not unique to me, right? Like my trials, my
No,
tribulations.
all of our dysfunction, we are all have it to one degree or another, and then some of us have just figured out how to handle it.
Right, handle it better, right? Yeah, that's the
Handle
game.
it better. Right?
Well,
So I think the piece right now is that's really important to voice is that that we are in it all together, and that we are in this collective field. We are in this collective shit show of a lot of stuff that's going down on the planet. That's pretty challenging.
It is,
and we're all feeling it. Like we are being affected by the collective energies on the planet, whether we like it or not. We're being affected by the people in our homes and in our communities and in our countries, and we're all feeling it. And most of us are working really hard at trying not to feel it.
yeah,
And if we look at the microcosm, like us, as we're talking about the 5 elements, and the 5 elements being made up of everything on earth, and then us, we are containing the 5 elements. That we're looking at our own inner work, our own inner process of learning how to feel, learning how to be with what's there, learning how to process and transmute it and transform it into something better.
Yep.
That's the thing that we're supposed to be doing, so that we can change and shift what we see out there as being messed up.
Right.
Because it's all that reflection, and we're if this is what our world is looking like and what the reality is, like, we have to go, oh wait, okay, I am that. Okay,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait. If I am that, what do I need to do to, come to, a higher alignment, integrity, devotion into my own evolution, my own change, my own being a better world.
Yeah. Well said, Katherine. So thank you for all of that. I love this conversation. There were lots of tidbits that I took that were just, nice eye openers for me to help me better frame my process. If people want to follow your work, they want to check you out, they want to, see what you're doing on the online world, where can people find you and track you?
I'm super easy to find at katherinebird.com. I'm really active on Facebook, pretty active on Instagram, like got the social media stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm easy to find out there.
What's your handle on Instagram? Are you just at Katherine Bird, or do you know?
I think I'm at Katherine Bird, but
Okay.
I think I'm at Katherine Bird 711. I think is my thing, 711.
Well, one of those
that's
two
my
people.
birthday is coming up.
Oh, very cool. Rock on. One of my best friends is July 11th also. That's very cool.
All right,
yeah,
there you go.
my lucky numbers too. Well, Katherine, thank you again for your time, your insights. I love the work you're doing, and I just appreciate your time and sharing, dropping your knowledge for us all.
Thanks, Gray. It's a great conversation.
You bet. Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.